Well, good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you this evening to the November 7th, 2017 Hendersonville Regional Planning Commission meeting. We're noting that we have a quorum present, and so with that we would note that everyone's here with the exception of Mr. Pinson and Ms. Ashley, and Key Bryant McCormick is not here at the present time. We may have some of them come in here in a few moments, so we'll note that we have a quorum present already. We have 3 public hearings tonight. The first one is public hearing by request from Dharma Patel to rezone 2.79 acres identified as Sumner County Map 159E Group B Parcel 29 located on the east side of Carrington Road south of East Main Street to rezone from general commercial to multifamily residential, and we have no one signed up for that public hearing, so I will declare that hearing closed. We have another public hearing tonight by request from James Wallace and Jared Crane to rezone 0.89 acres identified as Sumner County Map 146 Parcel 48 located on the south side of Avondale, east of Laverne Circle, from suburban residential low-density SR1 to heavy commercial HC, and we have nobody signed up.
We're here on that.
Okay.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to. We're on it. You're right here. Why don't you come on if you want to speak on it? I'm at the place right now. We would be happy to hear you speak.
He may be the owner.
Are you the applicant? Okay. Okay. We will be. You can go ahead and speak. That'd be great.
It's simple. We're just trying to.
Let me turn this on for you. Would you just announce give us your name and?
Jared Crane, owner of that property.
Okay.
Co-owner. James Wallace is present as well, and we are just wanting to change that from residential to heavy commercial, and just tentatively looking at doing some small warehouse space where somebody can maybe run a tile business out of it, or just maybe 5 or 6 bays, 10,000 square foot building, roughly something like that, and where somebody can just run a couple of small businesses, not heavy retail or anything like that, just where they could, like I said, a tile company, a plumbing company, kind of a place where they can store their place and leave out of every morning.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Crane.
All right.
Thank you so much. There are no other citizens signed up, so we'll declare that public hearing closed. And third public hearing tonight is a request from Bassland Development Partnership to approve a revised final development plan for Glenbrook North, located on the east and west sides of Andrews Run, north of Glenbrook Way, totaling 25.95 acres, identified as Sumner County Map 144 parcels 102.3, 102.8, and 103. We have one person signed up, Alderman Jim Waters. Would you please just your name, and love to hear your comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Jim Waters, 244 Southburn Drive, Ward 6. And let me first address my colleague up there, Alderman Borelli. It's sort of odd standing on this side of the podium instead of up there. You want to swap with me? Let me start by saying that we had some residents to join us this past Friday evening, and had a good discussion with the developers. During our meeting, the most asked question from the residents in attendance mainly centered on the 331 residential units, which consist of condos, townhomes, and mixed-use units, and also the increase in traffic on Forest Retreat Road and Andrews Run. I hope you've had the opportunity to review the photos that I passed out on your desk this afternoon. This area is heavily traveled. I do mean heavily traveled. From Alexander Place subdivision, Cross Point subdivision, and even from residents on Hunts Lane. It's not to mention the 490 to 500 vehicles coming from Glenbrook Apartments, located on Andrew Run, which has 312 apartments. Now, these figures have been confirmed by me with the management of the apartment complex. This is not only in the AM and PM traffic, it's all day long. In our meeting, the developer stated, and I want to read, he stated existing roadways and traffic signals will be able to handle the traffic, requiring no new infrastructure investment. This is simply not correct. We've tried to show you in the photos the area between the intersection and beyond the narrow bridge, which still is within the developer's property line. This was our major concern, and we asked the developer his plans to widen Forest Retreat Road from the intersection out to their property line. No response. However, we were told it was their intentions to extend the sidewalks from where it ends right now to their property line. Sidewalks only. He was asked how they plan to pass this bridge and install sidewalks. Again, no response. To me, extending and adding additional sidewalks should be considered, to me, new infrastructure to this location. Now, we understand the commercial project for this location is non-debatable, since it was approved by this board and BOMA several years ago. However, we realize this alone will create more traffic on Forest Retreat Road and Andrews Run, and with the additional 331 residential units that's before you this evening, it's going to create even more traffic. It's reported that Glenbrook Way is already in need of repairs. I submit to you this evening, our roads, our infrastructure are in need of repairs throughout our community. We, this board, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, have a very important challenge facing us as far as growth over the next few years. Do we want to keep up with our neighboring cities and neglect infrastructure, neglect our roads, neglect the drainage problems, or do we want to take care of our community and the future of our children and grandchildren? That's the question before you this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Waters. Hearing no other applicants, or excuse me, citizens for the hearing, I'll declare that public hearing closed. Going to move on item number 3 in our agenda, request for information for assistance. Additions, there's none. Additions to the agenda, there are none. Minutes, October 3, 2017. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Millsap, second by Mr. Altizer. Any? Okay, one abstention. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have 2 abstentions, okay? All right, then we have the consent agenda items. Meadows of Indian Lake Phase 6, final plat, they agree. Walking Line, final plat. Slim Chicken site plan, they agree with everything. And Magnetic Cold site plan, they agree with all comments. And Oakwood Farms site plan, they agree with all comments, with fire comments revised to state. Unless any commissioner would like to pull any of these off the consent agenda, I would entertain a motion to accept every one of them.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Mr. Mr. Millsap. Second by Ms. Stringfellow. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carried, so ordered. All right, let's move on to, there are no final plats, none. Going to preliminary final development plans, Glenbrook Village North, final development plan amendment. Who's doing this one, Mr. Free?
This will be Mr. Timothy Witten, our Assistant Planning Director.
Mr. Witten.
The staff report that you have is pretty detailed, so I'm just going to hit the highlights, and then if you'd like me to go into any particular section in detail, I'll be glad to do that. This is located on the west side of Andrews Run, north of Forest Retreat, zoned MXC. There's ER zoned property, state residential on the west side, and SR1 on the south side. The current master plan for Glenbrook Limerick North shows this area as about 186,000 square feet of commercial, mid-box and big box retail. So the development before you tonight is a mixed-use development. It'll be fairly unique in our area. I'll just dive right into the numbers. So the breakdown on the residential units, there's 331 residential units over this part of the planned development. They're all for sale units. Of those 331, 150 are in condo flat buildings. That's residential only. That's buildings 1, 2, and 3. 126 of the 331 are condos that are in 3 mixed-use buildings. And then the remaining 55 units are in townhomes. So another way to break down those numbers is there's 205 residential units that are in condo-only or townhome-only buildings. And the remaining 126 residential units are in the 3 mixed-use buildings. Those 3 mixed-use buildings, at 16, 17, and 19 on the map, those are up to 4 stories. Ground floor is commercial, retail, and then all the floors above are the residential. On the commercial side, they're proposing 67,000 square feet of commercial. 30,000 square feet of that is in commercial-only buildings, and then 37,000 square feet is in the 3 mixed-use buildings. They are asking to increase the allowed building height from 35 feet, as it's shown now in the current master plan, to go up to 58 feet, which would accommodate up to a 4-story building. Those 4-story buildings could be the 2 mixed-use buildings, 16 and 17, and then one of the condo buildings up at the north end of the development. That one could be 4 stories. It's actually 3 stories of living area, and then parking underneath that would bring it up to 4. So they're asking to increase that building height up to 58 feet. Our current ordinance, as a point of reference, allows up to 75 feet in height in this zone. On the uses on the residential side, of course, right now there aren't any residential uses allowed. So they're adding attached and semi-detached 1 and 2 family dwellings, and then multifamily. The multifamily would allow the condo flats. On the commercial side, all the same uses as are currently allowed in Glenbrook North, except they're adding community assembly, which allows churches and things like that. Entertainment and amusement services limited to art galleries, cheerleading schools, dance schools, gymnastics schools, sports instruction facilities, and arcades. And they're also adding restaurant quick service, which will be limited to buildings 15 and 18. They are asking for a couple of waivers. This development is being considered under the old 1985 ordinance. The explanation of that is in my staff report. I'll be glad to go into that, the explanation for why that is, if you'd like me to. But that 1985 ordinance requires 100 square feet of playground area per bedroom. For this development, that would amount to over 50,000 square foot of playground area. Just as a point of reference, the Taylor Swift playground in Memorial Park is 15,000 square feet. They are proposing to have a playground located within the proposed garden. The garden and the playground together are 3,500 square feet. They'll also have a pool. They'll also have a community lawn, which is about 13,000 square feet. They've also got a plaza and some other amenities. The 85 ordinance also requires a 6,000 square foot clubhouse. And they're also asking for a waiver from this. They are providing 3,500 square feet of communal space that will be within the condos, and that will accommodate such things as a cyber lounge / cafe, fitness room, shared office space and conference room, coffee bar, pet spa, bike storage and maintenance room, billiard room, or yoga and dance room. So the requirement is 6,000 square feet of clubhouse. They're providing 3,500 square feet. I'll also add that the 85 ordinance under which they're being considered, it does allow mixed-use development. However, it was not really written for this sort of more urban mixed-use development. It was contemplating more of your standard traditional residential development, which has larger lots and where you might expect more traditional amenities like a playground and large clubhouse. So that brings me to the last part of my discussion, and that is the phasing. Every FDP requires a phasing plan. Staff thought that the goal of the phasing plan should be to make sure that the condo buildings and the townhomes don't outpace the construction of the commercial buildings and the mixed-use buildings. If it turns out that there isn't a sufficient market for the mixed-use product, we need to know fairly early whether or not that's going to work. And we need to, if that market does not materialize, we need to know early on so that that master plan can be adjusted to figure out what are we going to do there. So the phasing plan that staff and the developer agreed to is that for every 75 residential units built in the condo only and townhome only buildings, they'll have to build one commercial and one mixed-use building. So the first 75 units, residential units that get built, before they can proceed with the next 75, they have to start construction on one commercial and one mixed use. So at the end of the day, if the developer stopped building anything else after building all the residential only buildings, that's buildings 1 through 12, we would have 2 commercial buildings and 2 mixed-use buildings built. And that would leave 2 commercial buildings and 1 mixed-use building unbuilt. That's all I have.
Okay, we'll hear from the developer now. If you would, just introduce yourself and...
Good evening. I am Jeff Hines with SNME, and we are the planners working with Vaslin on this. This is a little bit of a unique proposal for you folks. Certainly, Indian Lakes Village has been a mixed-use approach, but this is a little bit more along the lines of what you may have seen if you've been in Franklin lately, in Berry Farms or West Haven, some of those styles of development where it's more of a walkable mixed use, meaning the different uses are proximal to one another. A couple points here, and I will say with me this evening is Ken Renner, one of the vice presidents with Vaslin, Philip Piercy with SNME also, and then Beth Ostrowski with KCI, who traffic engineering. We have looked at that, and I'll talk to that in a minute. The uniqueness about this project is it's a blending both horizontally and vertically within structures of retail, commercial uses, residential uses, office uses, live-work units within the townhomes where an individual can have an office if they're a small proprietorship, architect, accountant on the first floor of their unit and live in the 2 floors above. I think we've all probably that have looked at other developments, that may have visited Seaside on trips or whatever, you see those types of uses, and I know it's a little bit of a first approach here. With this property currently being zoned for 184,000 square feet of commercial use, Vaslin approached us and said, we really want to look at doing something different here and take advantage of that. It's one, to introduce residents for the retailers that are in the center today. They see it as a very exciting move to have more shoppers be proximal to them, and there's 10 affidavits of support from different residents or different merchants, within the center indicating their support. The other thing it is really this type of approach, and we submitted, I think Beth Ostrowski with KCI submitted it to Matthew for his review, really reduces traffic from, when you look at 184,000 square feet of commercial, by about 18%. Because it blends different peaks of traffic use during the day, and that isn't, that's based on numbers that are national in terms of the peaks and by the land uses, and Beth can come up here and answer any questions if you have any. But it's a beauty of this style of development, because a portion of the trips when commercial and residential are separated and somebody jumps into their car to go shopping or pick up dry cleaning or those daily needs, drugstore, if you get those uses proximal, there's other alternatives: to walk, to ride a bike, to, walk your children on the neighborhood walk, especially when it's interconnected. And one of the things is this has a very strong connectivity of sidewalks. The other commitment that I did want to just point out to you, and this commitment was made Friday night at the public meeting, is one of the staff conditions is to improve forest retreat to our western property boundary to a 3-lane road section. And we committed, we being Vaslin, Friday evening to honor that and make those improvements. That is of record as of tonight. I think we certainly made that Friday evening, but we'll make it before you. So it is in the staff report, and Vaslin is willing to comply with that. So that would be widening forest retreat to the boundary of this site. And that widening is not required. In the original approval, it was only to provide sidewalks and curb and gutter to the western property boundary. The last thing that I would share with you, and then certainly want to answer any questions as the evening goes on, is this is really a commitment to quality, I think, in terms of building out a community and having integral open spaces. And two of the variances that Timothy mentioned with clubhouses and playgrounds are really integral to this type of plan. We have common green spaces that can host a farmer's market on a Saturday. We have community gardens that, is the playground just the part that has the play structure, or do the kids participate in the gardening? So when you look at all that together and walkability throughout the site, it all functions together in terms of a good plan, and I think that's what we're presenting for you. The buffer along the western property boundary to the residential property remains at 50 feet as it was originally proposed in the commercial PUD and will be landscaped. So a buffer is still remaining even though the uses are becoming more compatible. I think that is kind of a general overview. I'll stop there and certainly see if you have any questions for me, but we would appreciate your support of what we present to you as a pretty creative way to address a mixed-use development and move forward on this property.
If you'll just kind of stay close, you don't have to be standing there. We're going to get, as a commission here, we're going to talk a little bit. There are a couple of things before we discuss this that we probably ought to make clear. This is an amendment to an FDP, and so it will be a major amendment, obviously, and so it will require that this goes to BOMA, and I believe it's once, and so that will have to go before them. So that's the first thing. Second thing is that in terms of agreeing with staff comments and everything that the staff has requested, this applicant is there. So really, the things that we need to discuss tonight, and I think might be helpful for those that are in the audience as well as those watching, and maybe for some commissioners, and that is explaining a little bit on how under this submittal that they can choose to go into the 85 ordinance. And then the other part of that is a little bit, Mr. Witten, about you mentioned the envisioning of a residential use, a little bit different back in that time, and maybe how that works a little bit. And I'd like to go first, how we're arriving at the residential, how we're getting there, and just to go over, and any planning commissioner, of course, has any questions in the mix of that, we can go there. So let's go there first with the residential and how we're getting there and making it fit with the 85 ordinance.
Okay, well, so under the current ordinance, which is where you would normally expect this to start out, the current ordinance does allow mixed-use development. However, it does so in the context of, it allows a certain percentage of multifamily, 25%, and townhomes, 25%. And that percent is a percentage of single family. So in order to get your townhomes and your multifamily, you have to have a certain number of single family to start off with. There's no way around that. They're not, this development isn't proposing any single family. So that kicks them back to the 85 ordinance, under which they were initially, this whole development was initially approved under that 85 ordinance. And it does allow this type of mixed use. It does so in kind of a haphazard fashion because of, it was the older ordinance and there were certain things cobbled on to it, and there's a lot of ins and outs to that ordinance and difficult things, but it does allow this this type of development to have commercial townhomes and multifamily without any single-family residences.
Thank you, Mr. Witten. The only reason I wanted to get that out there is just to explain how we're getting there, and the fact that in the 85 ordinance there was some leeway for this kind of thing, and in our present ordinance that it is a use that in our current master plan that was envisioned a bit so that this kind of possibility could take place. Just as a point of history, some of the commissioners will remember back behind the movie theater in Indian Lake, streets of Indian Lake, there was actually a use proposed, something similar to this, if you'll remember, where we were contemplating something like that that did not materialize. So, definitely this is not something that's foreign to us. We've seen this before, and we've got that. Let me go down a little bit to Public Works comments. Mr. Hines, you're agreeing to all Public Works comments, widening, everything that has to do with Public Works comments, you're agreeing to all that. You've already stated that.
We are.
Okay. For fire, particular 4-story buildings, what is the maximum in that area, Mr. Witten, right now?
35 feet is the
Okay.
maximum for all the buildings.
Okay, and we're well within guidelines on that as well.
You mean as far as what's proposed now?
Yes.
They're asking to increase the height
58.
limitation to 58. And that's, but under our current ordinance, it goes up to 75 feet. for this
75,
zone.
right.
So yes,
That's what I was
we're well
looking
within
for. Okay.
range.
All right, so we're good with that. Playground. Let's talk about the playground a few moments. I think Mr. Witten did a really good analogy there with the 100 square feet to 50,000 square feet. 15,000 Memorial Park for Taylor Swift Memorial Park there off of Gallatin Road. But I do have a question. With the 3,500, the garden playground, 3,500, is the pool included in that, or add that on top? What is that? What square footage is that going to be, do you know?
If you take the deck space around it, it's part of a courtyard area between the two condominiums. All told, it's probably 6,000 square feet of that entire area. The pool itself.
In addition to the 35?
In addition to the 35.
Okay.
And then there's also 13,000 square feet of a commons green area and areas such as that.
All right, so we're looking at a playground, an amenity, a pool, and plus a passive space of 13,000 square feet for farmer's market or whatever you were saying?
Yes.
Okay, okay. All right. Any commissioners got any other questions? Mr. Lee?
Yes. I've got several questions. Timothy, maybe you could answer this. Steinmart property, which this will be one building adjacent to that, how tall is the Steinmart property? What's the height on that?
That building as well as all the other buildings in that shopping center are no more than 35 feet tall.
So I have a concern already that we're going to have the potential of something that looks out of nature with what is existing there already. And in fact, the examples that we've been given, nearly all of the examples are 3-story facilities, and I don't see any 4-story facilities. And normally when I do see a 3-story or 4-story facility, 1-story is the garage for parking. But I've got some concerns on the parking, but I was just concerned about the height.
The structure next to Steinmart is a 3-story structure, and it's shown as that in the pattern book labeled that way. So the height on that would be approximately 42 feet.
Yeah, and staff, we did have a comment in the initial round of comments that asked them to limit that particular building to no more than 45 feet in height. And as Jeff just said, 42 is what they're anticipating.
That's the one next to Steinmart.
Next to Steinmart,
but
correct.
not necessarily in the other part of the development. Or yes.
Correct.
What is the topography on the other side of that, though? Is it pretty flat, or does it go down a little bit?
I believe it's...
It drops a little bit. It all slopes from Andrews Run down toward the creek, which is kind of in the southwestern corner of the property. So it drops across the entirety of that, probably on the order of 7 to 8 feet from the top of the creek, the top of the bank that drops down to the creek up to Andrews Run. So those buildings will sit lower than the portion that has the Steinmart or Building 19 on the plan, as you see.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so one concern is that it fits in with the other in terms of the height, although it does help me a little bit in terms of what 19 is going to be like. What are we estimating that the cost of the flats in the townhomes to be? I'm sure you've already done an estimate of how much revenue will be generated from that. What are we looking at there, and what are the sizes of those?
Ken, you want to take the sizes and answer that? When you say cost, you mean sales price?
Yes, the sales price.
Looking at 200,000 to 400,000 for the price points there, and the sizes are all over the board. As we get into the smaller units, obviously it would be the less expensive ones.
So are we talking about 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, some sort of combination in that, or just 1 or 2-bedroom? What are we talking about?
Why don't you just step up?
Microphone, so we can get you on TV and everything. Smile real big.
You'll be a star after tonight.
I've had enough of that in my life.
Question by Mr. Lee. You're honored.
We've got, Jeff, and I know that I'm not as familiar with the unit mixes here as you guys probably are.
Well, it is a mix of units is what Mac McClung and I think has shared with me. So, yes, it would be a varied mix of sizes and bedrooms, certainly to hit those different price points.
But really, 1 to 3, not necessarily any studio units?
No,
studio?
not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
Nothing that small.
And one of the things that I think we should emphasize here too is that we've been in touch with the school systems about this and done some homework on that. And for these kind of mixed-use developments, you're looking at a far, far reduced number of students that would be put into the school system than you would for a comparable number of single-family homes. I know on the Urban Land Institute estimates that for a development like this, you would get about 20 students per every 100 units. So this development would generate about 60 students from K through 12. For a comparable number of single-family homes, you'd be looking at almost 200 students. So,
Okay. We made reference to the traffic study. Whose traffic study? Have we seen the traffic study? I haven't seen it.
Well, it's a condition of approval that the traffic study that was originally done be updated. So
Okay.
that is a condition of Public Works. What we did provide to the city is a analysis of land uses, meaning a commercial generator of traffic. It's not comparing it to what there is today. It's saying the use that's approved today, 184,000 square foot of mixed commercial use, generates X number of trips, and this blending of uses that are outlined on here, square footage wise, generates Y. The Y number is 18% less than what is currently generated by 184,000 square feet of commercial use.
Well, that's, certainly we can understand that, but if we're talking about something entirely different as well.
Mr. Lee, would it,
Yes.
would it be appropriate, let's hear from Mr. Boyd on that question as far as
Sure.
to answer yours.
Sure. I guess the biggest concern was the overall, and the biggest thing I picked up out of this was the overall traffic from this development will be less than what was originally approved, which I think would be from a traffic standpoint, would be a benefit. Now, it doesn't take into account what is happening today, but just comparing what was approved to what we have now, what they're proposing, it's less.
2005.
Yes. But based on the commercial space.
Mr. Lee?
Yeah. In terms of the parks, can you provide us any detail of your vision of the park? I mean, is it just open green space, or, what are we talking about?
Well, actually,
with those?
part of this submittal is a pattern book that was part of the plan submittal, and there's standards in there for amenities, open spaces with benches and lighting standards, recreational things within those spaces, landscaping certainly, but providing a varied palette of uses. I think staff, in working with them, basically said at the time of site plan, we want to see a complete palette of what benches, what lights, what trees are allowed in the different areas, and we said that would be a great way to approach it. But the commitment to the quality of those spaces is outlined in the pattern book.
Okay. One final item, that just as I look at the plan, often when we see a mixed-use area, or I have seen mixed-use areas such as this, the parking is either is underneath or above, and oftentimes with this sort of development, there is some gated areas of it for additional security. I mean, certainly some of your more commercial or retail areas are separated from, but I'm just thinking about, high-quality mixed-use development often has some sort of gated factor and some sort of control that all of the parking is just not like you'd see in a commercial development. Mm-hmm. And when I look at this is kind of what I see.
And that probably is true in a truly more urban setting, mm-hmm. More in your larger cities, Charlotte, Atlanta, Dallas, you see more urban wraps where you have parking garages or decks and multifamily units wrapping around them. That really isn't the vision here, and I don't think that's the vision for what Hendersonville would prefer in terms of the market. This is surface parked, which helps keep, number one, the price of the units down too, but you know, you don't have within your community a lot of wraps and kind of that dense, you know, 4, 5, 6-story tall buildings. This is more like the Berry Farms, whereby the buildings line the street, we have on-street parking for guests to come and visit, and the private residence parking is behind buildings 2, 3. Building 1 has parking beneath it, which would have elevators that go up. So building 1 may have something similar to what you were suggesting. But overall, it's a little bit more of a surface parked, but it's behind the building. It's screened with landscaping. The building is shading it. Could be gated, certainly for security, but I don't think we saw it as much of an urban condition, but more of, and Berry Farms was really the comparison that Vaslin used when they came to see us, because we worked and planned that project and have kind of guided it through. So that is a little more, you know, the retail, and a lot of the photos in here are from there. The retail's more one-story with high roof pitches, and it picks up a little bit more of the residential, country, agrarian architecture a little bit. That was a little bit of the vision for this.
Yeah, we just create a lot more groundwater when you have this in runoff, and where does that water go? And I mean, I know we have a big retention pond that you have in there, but I mean...
Well, actually, we have 2, but the other thing we do is when we have the park in the center normally, is we'll utilize that with some curb drains so that different areas drain to smaller green spaces throughout the development and capture that runoff, so you're not putting, you're allowing infiltration to occur in those areas, and then you have your stormwater detention in the larger ponds.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Ms. Petrelli?
Thank you. What is your impervious surface ratio?
It is under what it was originally. You know what, there's a set of plans back here. Sorry, but I need to check.
Sorry, I couldn't find it.
Well, it's in the hard copy set. The maximum lot coverage buildings was 65%, which was the standard. We kept that the same. ISR, we did required. What we're at is 26% required per the previous approved was 20%.
All right, so you're at where?
We're at 26.
Okay.
And that is literally not counting the entirety of all the green space down along the creek against that. It was taking just the developable acreage.
Sure. Kind of like what Dr. Lee just mentioned, I'm very concerned about runoff. I mean, if we've got an existing creek there, that means that there's water in it year-round, so it's already wet. And I realize you've got the 2 detention ponds, but I mean, one of them's right next to a major thoroughfare. Regarding the extension of the road, you're talking from the intersection of Forest Retreat and Andrews Run to the corner edge, is that correct?
Yes. Now, currently, that is a 3-lane section for some distance today because there is a left turn lane eastbound on Forest Retreat that can turn left or northbound onto Andrews Run. That 3-lane section would be extended to the west to the property boundary.
Okay, so that's, by my math, how many feet is that?
Approximately 300-400.
Yeah. was going to say
Yeah.
300 at least.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thumbnailing it off of here. I came up.
And across the drain that currently is there that Alderman Waters spoke about.
Sure. Well, obviously I am concerned about the increased traffic. I didn't quite understand, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't quite understand what you were saying about the traffic study with all the traffic coming and going at different times was below, because you've got more residential here, which means that you can kind of predict, yeah, people are going to work and coming and going, but when people live someplace, they're gonna jump in the car, so you can't really predict their movements to a certain extent.
Well, actually, and I'll let Beth take it if this doesn't satisfy you, but the ITE, Institute of Transportation Engineers, has national standards. They're adjusted for different regions of the country, meaning the southeast and even into subregions of that. So they're not applying the same standards to us that, they apply out west or in the northeast. They've studied how many trips different land uses produce. And commercial retail, restaurants are your highest, which would be part of the retail mix, and we still have 2 restaurant pads as part of this. Commercial retail is generally the second highest of those, and it drops down from there. Residential, based on your different sizes, average anywhere from about 5.5 to 7.5 trips per day, and that's going to work, coming back, and then also your convenience trips of you run to the grocery store, as a separate trip. You take the kids to soccer practice. So commercial is higher in those number of trips throughout the day of people coming to shop per square foot of developed use. And that's what Beth produced in terms of comparing those land uses. So it's not a pick a number by us as consultants. It's a published, it's used across the U.S. It's what traffic studies look at as far as generating the trips. What we agreed to do as part of the conditions is then update the study to today's background traffic, which means between when the original study was done in 2005 and today, there's more change of patterns of traffic utilizing forced retreat, and the stores are open. So we need to update that and build these trips in. But overall, I think the news that we think is very compelling is what we're proposing reduces from what's currently approved today, traffic by about 18%.
Okay, thank you. Marshall, do we need this exit entrance situation right here? Is that required? On Forest Retreat? Like, is that required by a code?
I don't know if it's required. I think we could allow it. I mean, but there's a certain distance that can be away from this intersection.
Yeah.
I think it would apply.
Sure. What I was questioning was the entry exit off of Forest Retreat Road. We have a lot of left-hand T-bone accidents in Hendersonville, which I think we probably experienced on the way here tonight. I'd like to cut down on those things, and also not add to the traffic dumping onto Forest Retreat Road per Alderman Waters' request. Right. I don't know if that's something that, if all the traffic is routed down Andrews Run, they're creating the traffic so they can route back out to a light. But I would like to hear what Alderman Waters has to say about the extension of the Forest Retreat Road, if I may.
Let's, first of all, Alderman Waters spoke a minute ago about the Forest Retreat Road as far as their issues, not issues really, about whether the developer was going to do that or not, widen the road out, fix the road. That's what I heard Mr. Waters say.
My question, though, is the length, because I can't have a conversation with him outside of this meeting.
Okay, okay. Then, Mr. Waters, if you would, we're going to allow you to come up.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What was the question?
So they're doing road improvements for that section, yes, right there. And when you were talking about road improvements, do you think that that will be enough?
Yeah, and too, Mr. Waters, were you aware of the improvements that they were going to make, or that they're saying that they're going to make now, when you met with the residents?
I know, I found out tonight, yeah. The photos I shared with you before we started, if you start at the intersection at Forest Retreat and Andrew Run, or Hillside, it depends on where you're coming from, that's a 2-lane with a turning lane. If you're coming from, let's say you're coming from Alexander Place, and you're going to turn left into the shopping center at Andrew Run, there is a turn lane there. But our concern is from that point that she just mentioned on the screen, out past the bridge, the small bridge, and to their property line, that's where it needs to be widened. And I understand now from from reading the reports, it's been agreed Forest Retreat to property line widen will incorporate 3 12-foot lanes and any related drainage improvements. And I take it that's from the intersection out to their property line. Am I right?
That's right.
Okay. Does that answer your question, huh?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, Mr.
Thank you,
Chairman,
Mr.
and is it
Cobb.
our understanding that they are doing what the residents and, to me, it sounds like we have come to an agreement. Is that correct or not?
I think
Do you
we-
know? Who knows?
Yeah, I think that they have agreed to all of the staff comments and all the road improvements that are related to Forest Retreat Road, all the improvements that need to happen. Yes, there's agreement on that.
If I may, and to your comment about that additional driveway cut, because this will be a 3-lane road section, you effectively have a center turn lane that would allow that movement. I think the majority of traffic, would certainly egress to Andrews Run, but the one commercial use, the parcel number 18 down there in the corner, is one that it would enable circulation there for that parcel. So the 3-lane road section otherwise, provides a way to get cars out of the travel lane if they want to turn or if they have a breakdown or whatever the case may be. By widening the road, we're really providing for that opportunity to keep that turn.
So there'll be a pretty good shoulder on the side, like you're gonna have 3 lanes, then are you gonna have a 10-foot shoulder on each side?
No, it would have curb and gutter on our side too.
Right on the side of the road? Like you're gonna
We
have
would-
middle lane, next lanes, then how much before you start putting your curb and gutter? How many feet,
Normally, if you have 3 12-foot lanes,
right?
and then, because a 12-foot lane does not count the 2-foot gutter pan as part of the curb and gutter, so you have a 2-foot gutter pan beyond the 12-foot driving lane, and then your curb in that location. I'd let Matthew, if he,
So not.
or Marshall
not
add
really-
anything.
Not really a shoulder. Yeah, so not really a shoulder.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Freed, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, one of the things, we've got this kind of conceptually up here with the amended final master development plan, but one thing we would do is, at such time that corner up there where that little yellow building would be, and when we're talking about that accessing out there, we would look at what that particular use was, how that parking was designed, the ingress and egress, and so really at that time, honestly, we may have here that it looks like it's coming out there, but when the city engineer and the planning department look at, in the future, whatever specific site plan, it may be that we limit that in some way. It may be, we've run into other situations where it may show it on a plan, but once it's built years after, then we run into a situation where we may limit it to only turn out in a certain way or only receive in a certain way. So it's not both, but really it would have to be something we'd look at at the time, which would also depend on the traffic flow at that time as we did the site plan. And that's the same thing with, which is not as problematic as everything up Andrews Run, where they're kind of showing access to that. More than likely, that's probably what would occur. But even at those, we would be looking at those as we were looking at site plans to see exactly, how that would function, or how the center median, whether that would be an open median or it was closed off, or how that was actually structured.
Mr. Bristol?
Yes, you mentioned that you had built some of these units in Brentwood, maybe down in southern part of Nashville. Where are the locations that you have built, maybe outside the state of Tennessee or regionally, other states, what have you?
Well, we are the planners, so we have not built. Vaseline has done the building. So if you're interested in communities designed like this, I mentioned Berry Farms, which is Franklin. We also have done within Franklin the Meridian development. West Haven is one that's fairly well known, just has been marketed as such. Within Nashville, there are numerous locations, probably a little more dense and more urban than this, similar to your comments, where garages are wraps and such. I think Berry Farms, if you've ever experienced that, is the best comparison to this in scale, heights of buildings. As I said, if you looked at the pattern book at all, a lot of the images in there for the condominiums and such are Berry Farms images.
Right. So my question is, so as these projects begin to be developed, and you have a residential component and you have a commercial component, what is the occupancy rates for the commercial to keep up with the residents? Because the last thing that you would want is for, Hendersonville has no problem as far as filling up residential type units. But what type of occupancy have these units, what is the, I guess, success rate of the commercial occupancy, so you don't have these live-work areas? And I imagine that when you sell the live-work, I guess we're primarily talking about that work product just being the lower level.
Correct.
Okay, so it's not necessarily connected. So what is the rate of occupancy for those as compared to the residential?
Well, I think I heard two things in your question. One was the commercial coming in. The second was more about the live works. And the live works.
Well, yeah, if those are two different questions to you, you break them out, please.
Yeah, sure. And that was going to help you. The live work units are built at the same time as others. And the units that are identified as live works, and the main location was around the Central Park, buildings 7 and 8 initially, and staff thought it would be great if some other ones could possibly fit that. So we also looked at buildings 10, 11, and 12, which surround the commons area, have on-street parking in the front. So those buildings generally are designed with a little bit more glass on that lower level, and the ability to have some very minute signage, either a hanging panel sign down, as we see in a lot of the older villages we go to, or a very small placard sign. It's not a commercial type signage, but it is where a business can be conducted, and I think we have 1,000 square feet on that first floor that is allowed to be a commercial office use. Some of the imagery that's in the pattern book, in Berry Farms, there's a person that sells their own beauty supplies. They make soaps and whatever. There's an accountant in one. There is a person that'll do massage therapy in another. It's not a traffic where people are having clients come in all day long. It is a very low-key generator of traffic. So that is built at the same time, and then an individual architecture is there. can use it in that regard, or they can live in it just as a residential unit. It's not required that they use it as a live-work, but it allows them to use it that way. And you'll see where you'll have a normal resident and you'll have a live-work right next door. They'll use the space in different ways, but it works very well together, and there's some of the imagery that shows that. The commercial, the challenge is always commercial retailers coming in want to see the residential rooftops before they open their store. So the timing of that's not as true with smaller, less corporate retailers, which is what this is catered to. The restaurants probably certainly might be a startup, or might be a national name sit-down restaurant on the two pads. But the retailers want to have some residents in place before they come. Staff and our group work together very diligently, and I will commend staff for pushing us to think outside the box as far as a phasing that gives the blending of this and assures that it happens, that not one phase gets too far ahead of the other one. So thus the commitment that Timothy has in the record, the conditions for approval that says 70 residential units equals the start of 2 commercial units, and part of those 70 residential can be live-work units. It doesn't remove, meaning
Okay, yeah.
they'd count the
Yeah, I
same.
appreciate your explanation. But what I understand about the live-work units, it's either or as far as live or work,
Correct.
okay? And in the live-work units, are the price points any different than the just a solely residential units?
Not substantially, because the only thing that you might do in a live-work unit is add a little bit of additional first floor to ceiling space within that. You know, a residential unit might be 10.6, 11-foot floor to floor height, and in those commercial ones, if you do have an office there, you might want an additional foot, 2 at most of ceiling height. So that would drive a little bit of additional cost, but not ostensibly being different from one another. And those are in townhomes only. They're not in the condominium units.
The live-works in the townhome only?
Correct. Yes. Where it's vertical ownership. So you work on your first floor and you own the 2 floors above.
Okay.
And you live on the 2 floors above.
Okay, so if you purchase a live-work unit, it's really one unit. It's just a preference of whether you decide to live there and work there, or?
Well, you have to live there.
Okay.
It's whether you live and work there.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bristol. Ms. McCormick.
In light of all of the presentation and the very thorough questions asked by the committee, and I'm familiar with the Berry Farms area, is very beautiful and forward-thinking. I move that we approve this project with all staff comments, granting also the 2 waivers, one of which was the reduced size in the park, the playground requirement, in addition to increasing the building height, considering your almost 20 feet lower than our current standards.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Did you get the motion down, Sydney?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we'll have an opportunity when the site plan comes in to do another look.
Oh, yes.
To do this fine tuning. Let me just say that I think we've needed something like this a long time. I think what was proposed originally in Indian Lake, there was a lot of interest in that. I have some very good friends that have just moved to Franklin, honestly, because they could not find a unit like this. They had a home, very nice home, they were ready to downsize, but they wanted to live somewhere where they could go shop, they could eat. They got spoiled. They live in a similar place, have a similar place in Florida, and they wanted something else here. So I think this will be a nice addition, but we want this very nice. You know, we don't want this to be just, well, Hendersonville doesn't have anything like this. We want this to be a place that you can come back and say, look what this did for this community. And one of the reasons I think you can do that is because as of yet, we still don't have an impact fee in this community. We most of us feel like we need one. I think we're working on that, but we don't have a way to recapture that long-term investment like Brentwood does and the Cool Springs area does. So if we don't get it on the front end, we don't get it at all. Right, Alderman Waters? So
I think we share.
good plan, yeah, good plan, and let's go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. My question was, did you get the motion? You got it? Okay, good. Okay. Any more discussion on this? All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? One. Ms. Petrelli? It carries. So
Thank you,
ordered.
folks.
This will move on now to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and we'll take it from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have no site plans at present. We have no sketch plats. No preliminary plats. We have one rezoning request. Two, excuse me. The first one is Carrington Place, Dharmesh Patel. Mr. Free, are you doing that or somebody else?
Yes, I will do that, Chairman. I'll just go over this fairly quickly. This is a 215-foot by 150-foot tract over on Carrington Road. If you'll remember at last month's meeting, there was recommended for approval of the larger section of this. This was a small section that was unintentionally left out when the applicant submitted, and looking to basically do the same thing that they were doing before. I might also mention, last time we did talk, and the developer is here if you have any questions, we did talk about this being a straight rezoning versus a planned development rezoning, and that there's, differences in that as far as when we're looking at the straight zoning, just looking at what the existing use is and is it appropriate for the new use. The developer did present some ideas of what they wanted to do, but that whatever would end up being done on the property if it was rezoned, there would have to be a site plan, and they would have to adhere to site plan and design review, which would come back before the Planning Commission as well. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve.
Second? Second by Ms. Stringfellow. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, carried. I'm sorry, Ms. Petrelli opposes. I'm so sorry. Avondale, who's running that one?
That's me, Chairman.
Okay.
On Avondale, this is 1200 Avondale. This is property. It's currently just outside the city limits, but it's in our plan area. It's currently zoned SR1. It's in an area over there off of Avondale that has a lot of industrial and heavy commercial zoning and uses. The applicant, which spoke earlier at the public hearing portion of the meeting, is looking to change this zone in order to do storage-related activities. And you can see in the staff report kind of lays out all the information. It does meet the future land use plan for this area, and I'm open to any questions. And then also the applicant here as well, and could answer any questions that you might have.
Okay. Any questions? Do I have a motion? Moved to approve of Ms. Ashley, second by several of the Stringfellow. Any more discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries. So ordered. Staff approved projects. El Grulin's Takira, Bluegrass Meadows, Savannah Place, Sorrentruta parking lot, and Verizon cell antenna. I don't think we need any action on that. Other? No other? Oh, go. Mr. Free.
I do real quick. I just want to introduce everybody to Grant Green, if Grant can raise his hand up there. He is our new senior planner. We're very excited about his addition to our planning team, and you will be seeing a lot of him in the upcoming upcoming meetings as we progress. Also, I wanted to let everybody know Sydney Simpson is with us here tonight, and she just received a promotion in our office, and she is now promoted to planner. And so we're excited about that. And again, it says a lot about the ability of current staff members and the ability to move up within the organization, and we certainly are excited about that with Sydney. I will transfer it over to Sydney. Sydney's going to share with you a little bit of something about our continuing education that's a requirement for planning commissioners and BZA members.
There we go. So as Keith mentioned, every year you have to do 4 hours of training by December 31st that we have to submit. And a couple of you have already done yours, so you're off the hook. But for those of you that have not, November 27th at the Gallatin City Hall in the basement from 5 to 9 is a great opportunity. If you did not get enough gobble until you wobble, you can come and be fed and get educated and get your CEs out of the way. I encourage you to do that. Please let me know whether or not you'll attend, and I'll send out something by email just to give you those more finite details, but just want to put that on your radar and your calendar.
Thank you, and
Thank
congratulations.
you. Thank you.
I would like just for a second before we go, just if you'll indulge me for just a minute. We've served on this board for a long time, and what I like about the Planning Commission is that we have a lot of smart people on this board, and the level of discussion and the questions are really good. And that's what we want to keep. We want to keep that banter going back and forth. That's what really drives us to a good solution. I do have a special request, just as a courtesy. Let us run all comments, all recognition through the chair. That will help us in a great deal. It's really supposed to be done that way. I kind of like to run it more relaxed, but as time goes on with the submittals and all, I would appreciate if we could just run comments through the chair as far as recognition, and that'll help me make sure the mics are on and all that. Just a courtesy type of thing, okay? I want to keep the relaxed atmosphere. I want us to have the discussion. That's what makes this the Planning Commission. But at the same time, I think we want to keep some level to where we're not having any abruption. It's not heard. So, hope you understand what I'm saying. Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All right. We're adjourned.